Hi everyone, welcome back to our literature class. Don't forget that this class is proudly sponsored by Literary Schools JAMB app. So for today, we're still looking at figures of speech. We've been looking at figures of speech. We looked at some in previous videos, simile, metaphor, antonomasia, ambiguity, and the like. So today, first up, we're going to be looking at is irony. Irony. Irony as a figure of speech simply means the use of contradictory statements or it be a contradictory situation. That's just irony. It's the use of contradictory statements. Or a contradictory situation. Let's slash it. Situation. Irony can be divided into three types. We have the verbal irony. Verbal irony, this is simply when verbal means speaking. So, verbal irony is simply when what is said is different from what is meant. Like what you literally say is like the opposite of what you actually mean. Let's put it that way. When what is said is different from what is meant. For example, a person might say, "Oh, this place is neat," and you actually mean that the place is dirty. Neat place you've got there. So neat place you have here, and you actually mean that oh the place is actually dirty, or you refer to it as neat. So this is an example of a verbal irony. What you're literally saying is different from what you actually mean. Refer to it as verbal, or when a person is sick and the person is like, oh God, I feel so great right now. I feel so great, and you don't feel good. You say it is verbal irony when what you say is not what you actually meant. Then we also have situational irony. So we also have situational irony, and this simply means when the opposite of what we expect to happen happens. Let's put that down. When the opposite of what is expected. We refer to that as situational irony. So this situational irony is simply when the opposite of what is expected, like we have our expectations, and then the opposite of that expectation actually occurs. I give an example. When a fire station burns down, a fire station burning down is an example of situational irony because a fire station actually puts out fires. When other buildings or what have you are on fire, you call the fire station, and then the fire station now burning down is a situational irony. Or a marriage counselor filing for divorce. Filing for divorce is a situational irony because we believe that for you to be a marriage counselor to an extent, you already know what it entails to keep a marriage, and then you're filing for divorce. Obviously, you would not put your hopes in such a marriage counselor. Or a common example, the Titanic sinking on its first trip. This is situational irony because the Titanic was believed to be unsinkable, like the world's greatest ship ever. It couldn't sink, and then it sank on its very first trip out. So that's like a situational irony. That was not what we were expecting to happen at all, but then the opposite happened. So that's situational irony, where the opposite of what is expected of us. And then lastly, we have dramatic irony. Dramatic irony simply occurs when the readers or audience know that what is happening is the opposite of what the characters think. In dramatic irony, so the audience or the readers know that what's happening is the opposite of what the characters think. Like the audience or the readers are aware of something that the characters are not yet aware of. So their actions and the actions of the characters then become funny to the audience because they know that what the characters are thinking is actually the opposite that's happening. An example is in Olarotine's The Gods Are Not to Blame, where we find King Odewale seriously searching for the cursed person in the kingdom, not knowing that he was the source of the curse on the kingdom. So that's dramatic irony. The readers or the audience knows something that the characters do not. Hence, it makes the actions of the character funny, which is the major use of irony to bring humor, although it can be used to pass messages across, but it's majorly used in bringing humor into situations. So it is simply the use of contradictory statements. And there are three types of irony. We have the verbal irony, situational irony, and dramatic irony. Next, we look at sarcasm. Sarcasm. Sarcasm is very similar to verbal irony. They both deal with saying the opposite of what a person means. Like same way for verbal irony, you're saying something and you mean something else. That's how we have it for sarcasm. You're saying something but you mean the opposite. So the only difference between sarcasm and verbal irony is the intent. Sarcasm is meant to mock, to ridicule, to taunt, or to tease. Unlike irony, irony is meant simply to like add humor or point out the absurdity of a situation. But sarcasm is meant to ridicule. Let's say it's the use of contradictory statements. Is the use of contradictory statements to mock or ridicule. Is the use of contradictory statements to mock or ridicule. Now, it is very difficult to express sarcasm in written works because it's more about the tone. Sarcasm is more about the delivery. Because like most times, if you find it in written work, it's usually indicated. For example, you have you've been so helpful. Then you see something like she said sarcastically. So it's usually indicated most times in written works. So readers know what the author or the writer of the work is hinting at most times. It's very difficult to express sarcasm in written works. Another example, tell me something I don't know. So this is another example of sarcasm. So sarcasm is similar to verbal irony, but the difference is in what it's meant to do. While verbal irony is simply for humor, sarcasm is meant to mock. So up next we have oxymoron. Oxymoron is a figure of speech that allows us to use two contradictory words or two opposing words side by side in sentences. So put it that way, is the use of two opposing words in sentences. Oxymoron is the use of two opposing words in sentences. It's also used to add humor, just like in irony. We can use oxymoron to express humor, or we can use it to like challenge readers. Let's put it that way. So with the use of two words that mean opposite, not even just the readers, even the writers, because it takes skill or creativity to actually combine two word opposites and for it to make sense. So for creativity both on the part of the writer and on the part of the reader. So the use of two opposing words in sentences is oxymoron. Example, we have pretty ugly. Examples. Sometimes you see that person is pretty ugly without even like stopping to think that the words are opposites and could be confusing for someone that doesn't understand or act naturally. If you're acting, it's not natural. And if it's natural, it's not acting. Or we say act naturally. Or we have clearly confused. These two words are opposite. If it's clear, there's no confusion. And if there's confusion, it's not clear. So what the person means is that it is obvious to everybody that this person is confused. So you say clearly confused or only choice. If that's the only choice, it's not much of a choice after all. Because choices mean you have like variety of options, but only means just one. So only choice is an example of oxymoron. Real fake, real fake. If it is real, it can't be fake. And if it's fake, it can't be real. Or student teacher. Student teacher. We also have live recording or original copy. These are common examples of oxymoron. So you can use them in sentences. For example, the necklace was real fake. Or you can say Tayo is clearly confused. Forgive my L. So you can use these oxymorons in sentences too. Two opposing words, words that mean opposite things. Using them side by side in sentences. That's oxymoron. Then up next, we look at antithesis. Antithesis. Antithesis means opposites. Now, as a figure of speech, it means two opposing concepts or ideas in a sentence. That's figure of speech antithesis. Antithesis is simply the use of two contrasting or opposing ideas in a sentence. Let's put that down. Two contrasting ideas. So refer to that as antithesis, two contrasting ideas or two contrasting concepts in a sentence. Refer to it as antithesis. And then to help emphasize the contrast, to help make it clear, the contrast, to make the contrast clearer, we usually express these contrasting ideas in similar grammatical structures where one part reverses the other. Let's use an example to illustrate. No pain, no gain. So we look at this sentence now, for example, no pain, no gain. Pain and gain are contrasting ideas, like they are literally opposites. But then we're using them in a sentence, both contrasting ideas or concepts. And now you look at the grammatical setup, you have no coming before a verb, no coming before a verb, something similar. That's what we really mean by the grammatical structure for antithesis. So we have two contrasting ideas presented in similar grammatical structure. So the contrast is clearer for antithesis. Other examples you have man proposes, God disposes. Then the very common, so air is human, to forgive is divine. So to err is human, to forgive is divine. These are like contrasting human, divine, contrasting ideas in a sentence. Now let's take note. To easily recognize antithesis, the sentence is usually made up of two parts, separated by maybe a comma or but or a semicolon, and one part reverses the other. That's how we can easily recognize antithesis in statements, or let's say in sentences, literary works, as the case may be. So we are dealing with two contrasting ideas in a sentence, and they are commonly expressed in similar grammatical structures to emphasize contrast. Then next we look at paradox. Paradox is similar to antithesis, but while antithesis means two contrasting ideas in a sentence, paradox is simply a statement that contradicts itself. So, paradox is a contradictory statement, a statement that contradicts itself. It seems true, it seems like it's not true. Or at first glance, when you look at a paradoxical statement, you it almost feels like this doesn't make sense. But upon further reflection, you realize that okay, you realize the logic behind the statement. So paradox is different from antithesis. Antithesis presents two contrasting ideas in a sentence, usually in similar grammatical structure. But for paradox, it's just a sentence that contradicts itself. Example, we have less is more. Ads use this mostly. Less is more. Then the best way out is true. Other examples we have, it was the beginning of the end. You also have givers never lack. So these are common examples of paradox, statements that contradict themselves. Next we have euphemism. So euphemism is simply the use of figurative language to replace words or phrases that sound impolite when you express them literally. So we use figure of speech to like water down the statement. For example, instead of saying I was fired, you could say I was laid off. Or instead of saying a person was fired, you can easily say the person was laid off. Or instead of saying a person is unemployed, you say she's in between jobs. It is a less harsh method of saying it, instead of just saying she doesn't have a job or she's unemployed. So you can easily say she's in between jobs, or she tossed her cookies. Instead of saying vomited or threw up, you could use she tossed her cookies. Kick the bucket, that's very common. Instead of saying a person died, a less harsh way of representing it would be saying a person kicked the bucket. Another example is special children or people with special needs. Instead of saying the person has a disability or describing the disability that such a person or a child has, you could just replace it with the word special. So these are examples of euphemisms, trying to like soften or avoid bluntness in particular situations. So you use figurative language to express it instead of being literal.